If you've been studying Japanese, you've probably heard tons of ways of how to study grammar, whether that's through textbooks, memorizing conjugation tables, or my personal favorite, just letting it come to you naturally. Yeah, because slamming my head against the wall repeatedly until enlightenment came to me is exactly how I passed the jlpt. Not. Hi everyone, my name's Jared. I've been studying Japanese for 6+ years now. I've passed the jlpt N2, read a couple of Japanese novels, and have 1,000+ hours of immersion under the ajatt method. But I wasted countless hours chasing the wrong study methods and bad study habits, and I don't want the same thing to happen to you guys, which is why in this video, I'm going to be covering 5 key strategies on how to study Japanese grammar effectively, when to drop the textbooks, when to memorize, and why some grammar points just might not be worth your time. I'll also be breaking down real Japanese from anime and manga, so you'll want to stick around for that. I even threw in a little skit as a bonus showing you why textbook Japanese just might not cut it in real life. And I promise, if you just give me a few minutes of your time and watch this video, I'll save you countless hours of unnecessary study time. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to approach Japanese grammar. Now, let's start with the biggest mistake learners make when studying grammar. So a lot of people tend to think that if you just memorize enough vocab and grammar, you should be totally fine when it comes to interpreting and formulating Japanese sentences. The main issue with this is once you get to those intermediate or advanced stages, you're going to encounter a lot of grammar that has complex meanings, overlapping meanings, and nuances that just aren't quite captured that well by the textbooks. So when it comes to having those real-time conversations, you don't have time to pause and think in your head, what's the next best sentence I can come up with? Because let's be honest, awkward silence is awkward. And if you guys have ever seen those Death Note videos without the internal dialogues, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
That there were only 3 notes. You never even considered that there might be a 4th. What do you make of that?
Well, you got me there. I didn't think of that.
How do we solve all this? Well, by learning grammar in context, of course, right? Not by using these. Now, these are really helpful if you want to grind for tests and whatnot, like I did. But in reality, there's grammar points in here that have a lot of overlap, and I'm going to showcase one. キューブを落としの際、キューブを落とすに際して、キューブを落とした途端に、キューブを落としたかと思った、キューブを落とすか落とさないかのうちに。
Oh my god, bro.
So most people study grammar by learning a new rule, grinding a bunch of example sentences, and then just hoping for the best. Now, the main issue with this is that, yeah, you can memorize as much vocab and grammar points as you'd like, but when you encounter real Japanese in action in the real world, it's going to be very hard to break down those sentences. And I'll show you a quick example of this. Let's take 2 words for example, wataru and koeru. They both mean to cross if you translate them literally. I'm going to play some anime clips right now and see if you can kind of pick up the difference between the 2 sentences using them.
多少の心配はあるが、海を渡ろう。エミリアとの約束絶対に果たしてやる。あの夜を乗り越えて。
So hopefully watching those 2 clips gave you a better idea of the nuances between those 2 words. But also, I'm going to go on the flip side. So let's say that you're studying Japanese, and you know that wataru and koeru both mean cross, and that's it. And you also know that the word hashi means bridge. Hashi wo wataru. Okay, good. So to cross a bridge. Instead of saying hashi o watatteiru, watattemasu, right? I'm crossing the bridge. You could say hashi o koetemasu, koeteru, right? But the problem with this is that yes, literally translated to English, I'm crossing the bridge. But koeru has more of this image of surpassing or overcoming an obstacle, right? So it makes it sound more like that bridge is in your way and you're actually climbing over it, over the bridge, not crossing over it, but you're literally like the bridge is here in front of you and you're just climbing that thing. So I don't want you to get stressed about it because trust me, learning Japanese is a super fun process, but this is kind of why it's important to learn words in context. It's how you did it in your native language and it's how you're gonna have to do it for Japanese if you want to speak smoothly and use the right words. So to sum this part of the video up, you don't need to memorize every bit of conjugation up front. The more grammar that you encounter, the more it'll just start to feel right, provided that you study here and there. But even if you do learn grammar through context, there's still one big mistake that holds a lot of people back, and that's not balancing input and output. Alright, so let's say you're getting tons of comprehensible input. You're watching all the best anime, maybe even listening to podcasts while you sleep for whatever reason. And then you finally get the courage to speak up and say something in Japanese, but the native speaker responds back so fast it all goes over your head. Or on the flip side, nothing comes out of your mouth. This is a big issue that a lot of learners experience because they're not balancing input and output properly. You need to do both. So I'll give you two extreme cases here. Let's say we have person A. They've been immersing for thousands of hours, and yeah, their passive Japanese skills, really good. But when it comes to formulating sentences in real time, that is a completely different skill, and they are going to freeze up in those conversations. Then we take person B. Full output, been hovering over textbooks since day one, getting all those Genki phrases memorized and all of those conversations in their head and calculated. But when they go to speak to a Japanese person to have a real conversation, their response totally unexpected, and they have no idea what they're saying, and they can't get a single word out in response. So how exactly do you balance input and output? So I would start by putting the load on input more so than output at the beginning. And by that, I mean going to grammar sites such as Taiken's Grammar, scrolling through, and familiarizing yourself with basic grammar points. This way you'll get a good grasp of how Japanese sentences are structured and just basic grammar overall. Then as you get more confident and better, what you're going to want to do is start incorporating more of that output. And by the way, some key methods that I have for doing input is one, to listen with intent. So instead of just kind of sitting there and letting the Japanese play into your ears, turn on the Japanese subtitles, look at them, find words and grammar points that stand out to you, and really try to replay those and shadow them, figure out what they mean. Another thing that I like to do is active versus passive input, right? So with passive, you're just sitting there having fun listening to the show, or maybe not even paying attention and just letting it play. And this is definitely less mentally exhausting than active immersion or active input. And I'm going to kind of show you a clip of me doing some active input on a show I'm currently watching. So as you can see, it entails going through the subtitles. I'm sentence mining for both vocabulary and grammar I may not be familiar with. I'm putting in the pitch accents and the colorings for that. Maybe reading it out loud a few times to make sure I'm familiar with it and know how a native would pronounce them. And yeah, then I'll see it a few more days later in my SRS app. So it is a really intensive process, but it is the most bang for your buck. So that's something that you should utilize when you have the time and energy to do so. So it really is important to have a really good balance between input and output. That way you both know what your conversation partner is saying, and two, how you can formulate your responses and reply in like. But even if you do balance input and output really well, there is one thing that can supercharge your grammar learning, and a lot of people overlook it. So let's say you're studying grammar and you actually are balancing input and output, but for some reason you just don't feel like the grammar is sticking naturally. You learn a grammar point, and when you try to use it, it's just gone. So this is where sentence mining comes into play. Instead of memorizing abstract rules, you actually capture sentences out in the wild that show the grammar being used in context, instead of having it explained to you in a textbook. By the way, if you are interested in a more in-depth explanation on sentence mining and immersion tools, I actually break that down in this video, which will be linked at the end of this one. Textbooks often give you robotic, out-of-context examples, but grammar isn't something that's memorized. It's learned through repeated exposure to real, meaningful sentences. Your brain naturally picks up patterns without even realizing it. The more times you see grammar in different contexts, the more it just kind of clicks in your head without you even realizing. Alright, so how do you actually do this? Well, if you're reading manga, watching anime or TV, just start looking around and picking out sentences that stand out to you. Then you can use a notebook, Anki, or even your phone's note app, whatever works for you, to note down that sentence and save it. And don't just write down the translation, make sure you actually understand the sentence and the different grammatical pieces in context. So we'll break down this sentence right here. なんで急に見えるようになったんだろう? ようになる is another grammar point here, something that you will see quite a lot, and it's to come to do something. So 見えるようになる, like to come to be able to see in this case. This is a really useful website as well, Immersion Kit. So ようになる Let's say we're watching Code Geass, and お前の目が見えるようになる頃にはきっとそうなってるよ. The context is that this character is blind from trauma or stress. We see ようになる again. 見えるようになったんだろう. 見えるようになる. So we can see there's this pattern here. There's a word here, ようになる, to come to be able to do this thing. This is a really useful website. I'll put it down in the description, but it's really handy to see, if you look up a grammar point, you can see what other animes it's used in. So it's really useful to hear it in a natural setting. The more you see certain grammatical patterns out in the world, the more it becomes part of your own Japanese. But even if you are sentence mining, there is still one thing that can slow down your studies drastically: relying too much on translations. Alright, Be honest. How many times have you encountered a Japanese sentence, then gone to look at the English translation, connected all the dots and nodded your head, only to come back and realize you've completely forgotten how it works? You feel like you get it in the moment, but when you try to recall it later, it's gone. What's really happening is you're relying too much on translation to your native language as a crutch, and you never really get the time to process that sentence in Japanese. Japanese doesn't map one-to-one to English, and here's one of my favorite pictures showcasing that. If you start to rely on translations too much, you're training your brain to start processing in English first, rather than just understanding the Japanese as it is. So if we take smaller segments of Japanese, let's say ikanakucha, which means I've gotta go, I didn't just look at the verb stem and the conjugation in my head, then translate it, then say, oh, that's I gotta go. I just know what that means. And there's many other little phrases like that once you start to kind of grasp their meaning intuitively, it makes interpreting Japanese way faster and way easier. So instead of asking yourself, what's the English equivalent? Actually try and process the Japanese and ask yourself, what does this really mean? One helpful kind of strategy I have for this is after I read a sentence or hear one, I'll close my eyes and try to imagine the scenario. Even if you're not an advanced learner, you can also use beginner-friendly dictionaries, or if you are advanced, you can use monolingual dictionaries to avoid those English translations. It's also helpful to learn using pictures. So let's say ikanakucha, I gotta go. Instead of using the phrase I gotta go, just put a picture of somebody running or in a hurry to leave for something. If you train your brain with images, then it makes that processing much more quicker, because when you hear the word, your brain will instantly populate with that image. So that is really one useful strategy I use to kind of train my brain to go Japanese to image and not Japanese to English to image. It makes my processing a lot faster. You can also start ditching the English subtitles. And while this may sound near impossible at first to some people, if you start with the easy to comprehend shows that you're actually interested in, you can even throw in some Japanese subtitles in there and start looking at those. As you start building up your grammar and also your vocab count, you'll find these easier and easier to comprehend, and you can climb to more advanced content. Now, even if you do cut down on translations, there's still one more thing that can make or break your Japanese grammar learning progress, and that's taking what you learn and using it in actual conversations. Have you ever spent weeks studying a grammar point, ready to use it, and it comes time in that conversation, and then your mind just completely freezes? Look, input is king, but if you never actually practice using what you've learned, then you're gonna have a really bad time when it comes to actually using it when it counts. So the real way to remedy this is to start writing, start using it. And one good way to do that is to start a daily diary in Japanese. So start with basic, simple Japanese, and then work it up. Start adding in grammar points that you've been learning along the way until it gets more and more complex. And when you feel comfortable enough, that's when you can start downloading language exchange apps such as iTalki or HelloTalk. And that way you can work more on your output with real people. What you don't want to do is rely solely on textbooks for all of your grammar, vocab, and conversational knowledge without talking to people. Because if you do, it'll look something like this.
どうも、久しぶりです。私は久しぶりにあなたに会うことができて光栄です。ところで、あなたの昼食の摂取はすでに完了しましたか？申し訳ございません。カジュアルな言い方がいいですね。まあ、そうだな。飯はもう食らったのか？なんで戦国武将になった？これはカジュアルが書いてありますが。いや、カジュアルにも程があるわ。昼ご飯は何を召し上がりましたか？それは丁寧すぎる。もう昼ご飯食べたっていいから。短すぎます。短すぎます。それが日本語だよ。短すぎます。
If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave a like. And if you love this video, feel free to subscribe and drop a comment. For the algorithm, of course. No, but seriously, have you ever tried taking a new grammar point and bringing it into a conversation, but your mind just goes completely blank? Drop a comment, I'd love to hear about it. And by the way, studying grammar is very important, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. A lot of the development actually happens while you're immersing. So, if you'd like to learn more about immersing in Japanese and the best tools to do so, go ahead and check out this video. And if you'd like to stay in touch, we have a wonderful Discord community full of motivated, awesome Japanese learners just like you. So keep learning, keep immersing, and please don't fall into the same grammar trap that I did. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye. you.